The Rancher's Choice by Simon Cross. The telegram trembled in Adelaide Morrison's gloved hands as she stood on the dusty platform of Copper Ridge Station, the Arizona Territory sun beating down mercilessly on her Navy traveling dress. 3 weeks of train travel from Boston had brought her to this moment, and now she wondered if she'd made the gravest mistake of her life. Arriving Thursday stop. Father gravely ill stop. Come immediately stop. Samuel Morrison. Her brother's words echoed in her mind as she searched the sparse crowd for a familiar face. 7 years had passed since she'd left this unforgiving land for the refined society of New England, and she'd never intended to return. The girl who'd once ridden bareback across the mesas had transformed into a proper lady, or so she'd believed until this morning, when homesickness had struck her like a physical blow. Miss Morrison. The voice, deep and cautious, made her turn. A man approached, his boots raising small clouds of dust with each step. Adelaide's breath caught as she recognized the broad shoulders and confident stride, though the boy she'd known had grown into someone far more imposing. James Caldwell stood before her, his dark hair longer than fashion dictated, his sun-weathered face bearing new lines around eyes that remained the same striking blue she remembered. James. His name escaped her lips before she could stop it, carried on a breath that felt suspiciously like relief. He removed his hat, revealing hair that curled slightly at the collar. Your brother sent me to fetch you. I'm sorry about your father. Adelaide nodded, not trusting her voice. The formal distance in his tone wounded her more than she'd expected. Once they'd been inseparable, racing their horses across the open range, sharing dreams under star-filled skies, stealing kisses behind the schoolhouse. But that was before her father had forbidden their courtship, before she'd chosen the safety of Boston over the uncertainty of staying. Thank you for coming, she managed, adjusting her grip on her carpetbag. How is he? Weak but fighting. Doc Patterson says it's his lungs, too many years breathing this dry air. James gestured toward a well-maintained buckboard. Your brother's been taking care of the ranch, but he's needed you. As he loaded her trunk, Adelaide noticed the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders, the easy strength in his movements. The years had been kind to him, transforming the earnest young man she'd known into someone who commanded respect without demanding it. You look well, she said, then immediately regretted the personal observation. James paused, his hand still on her trunk. City life agrees with you. There was something in his tone, not quite accusation, but close enough to make her defensive. I've built a good life there. I teach at a finishing school for young ladies. Teaching them to be proper, I suppose. He secured the trunk with practiced efficiency. Different from the wild thing who used to outride half the men in the territory. Adelaide felt color rise in her cheeks. People change, James. We grow up. Some of us do. He offered his hand to help her into the buckboard, and she hesitated only a moment before accepting. His touch was warm, calloused from years of ranch work, and entirely too familiar. The ride to her family's ranch took them through landscape that hadn't changed, red rock formations jutting from the earth like ancient sentinels, scrub brush dotting the rolling hills, and everywhere the vast sky that seemed to stretch into infinity. Despite herself, Adelaide felt something inside her chest loosen, as if she'd been holding her breath for 7 years. You've expanded, she observed, noting new fencing and a larger barn than she remembered. Some. Your father helped me buy the Henderson place when old Jake decided to move to California. James kept his eyes on the road ahead. Made sense to combine the operations. You're doing well, then. Well enough? He slanted a glance at her. Not that it matters now. There was bitterness in his voice, and Adelaide wondered if he was thinking of that last terrible argument before she'd left. Her father had been adamant that she could do better than a ranch hand with no prospects, and in her youth and inexperience, she'd believed him. The cultured gentleman who'd courted her in Boston had seemed like the answer to all her prayers, until she'd realized that Marcus Whitmore's affections were as carefully calculated as his business dealings. I heard about your engagement, James said, as if reading her thoughts. Congratulations. Adelaide's hand instinctively moved to her bare ring finger. She'd removed Marcus's ring the day she'd learned the truth about his gambling debts and his plan to use her small inheritance to pay them. Thank you. Something in her tone must have given her away, because James finally looked at her directly. You don't sound particularly happy about it. She started to offer the polite response she'd practiced, then stopped. This was James, who'd known her before she'd learned to hide her true feelings behind proper manners. The engagement is over. His hands tightened on the reins. "I'm sorry." "I'm not." The admission surprised her with its honesty. "I realized I was marrying someone I didn't truly know, someone who didn't know me." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creaking of the buckboard and the steady clip-clop of the horse's hooves. Adelaide found herself studying James's profile, noting the way the afternoon light caught the slight wave in his hair, the determined set of his jaw. He'd always been handsome, but now there was a maturity to his features that spoke of responsibility and hard-won wisdom. "Why did you really come back?" he asked suddenly. "I told you. Father's illness." "You could have sent money for doctors, could have written letters." His blue eyes found hers. "Why now, Adelaide? Why really?" The question hung between them, loaded with 7 years of unspoken words. Adelaide looked away, watching a hawk circle overhead. "Perhaps I needed to remember who I used to be." And who was that? Someone who wasn't afraid to take risks. Someone who trusted her instincts. She met his gaze steadily. Someone who didn't run away when things became difficult. James pulled the buckboard to a stop. In the sudden silence, Adelaide could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of his attention like a physical touch. "Is that what you think you did? Run away?" "Didn't I?" She turned to face him fully. "You offered me everything you had, and I chose the safety of a world I understood over the uncertainty of staying here with you. You chose what your father wanted. I chose what I thought was best." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "I was 18, James. 18 and terrified of making the wrong choice." "And now?" The question was quiet, but it carried the weight of possibility. Adelaide felt something shift inside her, a recognition of the woman she'd become during these long years away, someone who'd learned to trust her own judgment, who'd discovered her own strength. "Now I know that the wrong choice was leaving in the first place." The Morrison Ranch house looked smaller than Adelaide remembered, its weathered wood and practical design a stark contrast to the elegant townhouses she'd grown accustomed to in Boston. But as James helped her down from the buckboard, she felt an unexpected sense of homecoming that had nothing to do with the building and everything to do with the man whose hands lingered a moment too long at her waist. "Adelaide." Samuel emerged from the house, his face showing the strain of the past weeks. Her brother had grown into a man in her absence, his shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of family responsibility. "Thank God you're here." She embraced him, noting how thin he'd become. "How is father?" "Resting. The doctor gave him something for the pain." Samuel's eyes were worried. "He's been asking for you." Adelaide nodded, then turned to James. "Thank you for bringing me home." "I'll take care of your trunk," he said, but his eyes said more than his words. Inside, the house carried the familiar sense of her childhood, leather, wood smoke, and the faint fragrance of her mother's lavender sachets, still tucked in the linen closet after all these years. Her father's room was dim, the curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. "Father?" She approached the bed quietly. His eyes opened, and she was shocked by how frail he looked. The powerful man who'd once commanded both ranch and family had been reduced to a shadow of himself. "My girl." His voice was barely a whisper. "You came." "Of course I came." She took his hand, surprised by its fragility. "I'm here now." "I was wrong," he said, his eyes urgent. "About the boy." "About James. I was wrong to send you away." Adelaide's throat tightened. "Father, you don't need to." "I do." His grip strengthened slightly. "I wanted better for you, but I didn't understand that better isn't always about money or position. It's about finding someone who sees your true self and loves you for it." Tears burned behind her eyes. "Rest now, we'll talk more tomorrow." But her father's eyes had already closed, his breathing settling into the rhythmic pattern of sleep. Adelaide sat beside him for a long time, watching the rise and fall of his chest, thinking about the choices that had shaped their lives. When she finally emerged, she found James in the kitchen with Samuel, discussing ranch business over coffee. They looked up as she entered, and she saw the question in James's eyes. "He's sleeping," she said, accepting the cup Samuel offered. "He seems peaceful." "Dr. Patterson says it won't be long," Samuel said quietly. "A few weeks at most." Adelaide nodded, struggling to process the finality of it. She'd thought she'd have more time to make amends, to rebuild the relationship they'd lost. "I should go," James said, standing. "But I'll be back tomorrow to check on things." Stay for dinner, Adelaide said quickly, surprising herself. Please. I'd like to hear about what's been happening here. James hesitated, glancing at Samuel, who nodded encouragingly. If you're sure. As Adelaide prepared a simple meal, she found herself falling into old rhythms. James sat at the kitchen table, his long legs stretched out, telling stories that made Samuel laugh. The sound was something she'd missed without realizing it. The easy camaraderie of people who'd known each other all their lives. Remember when Adelaide tried to break that Mustang? Samuel was saying. Father was so angry he couldn't speak for 5 minutes. She got thrown 6 times, James added, his eyes twinkling. But she kept getting back on. I was determined to prove I could do anything you boys could do, Adelaide said, setting plates before them, even if it nearly killed me. Your father was proud, though, James said seriously. He told me later that he'd never seen such determination in anyone so young. As they ate, Adelaide found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. The conversation flowed easily, touching on shared memories, current events, and the challenges facing the ranch. James spoke knowledgeably about cattle markets and water rights, demonstrating a business acumen that impressed her. You've done well for yourself, she said as Samuel excused himself to check on their father. I've worked hard, James replied. But I've also been lucky. Your father taught me a lot about running a ranch. Even after, he didn't finish the sentence, but Adelaide understood. Even after he forbade you to court me. He was protecting you. I understand that now, James pushed back from the table. I was a hired hand with big dreams and no guarantee I could provide for a wife. And now I own 3,000 acres, employ 12 men, and have contracts with buyers in Denver and San Francisco. He met her eyes. Now I could provide for a wife. The words hung between them, loaded with implication. Adelaide felt her pulse quicken. James. I know you're not the same person who left 7 years ago, he said quietly, and I'm not the same man. But some things don't change, Adelaide. The way I feel about you, that's never changed. She stood abruptly, moving to the window. Outside, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink that she'd never seen recreated in any Boston drawing room. I hurt you, she said without turning around. I chose safety over love, and I hurt you terribly. You made the choice you thought was right at the time. And you forgave me? She turned to face him. Just like that? James was quiet for a long moment. I was angry for a long time. Angry and hurt and bitter. But holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and expecting it to hurt you. I had to let it go to move forward. And did you move forward? I built a life, he said carefully. A successful ranch, good friends, the respect of my peers. But I never married, if that's what you're asking. Adelaide felt relief flood through her, followed immediately by guilt. What right did she have to be glad that he'd remained alone? There were opportunities, he continued. Good women who would have made fine wives. But I couldn't commit to someone when my thoughts kept returning to a girl who'd chosen another path. I never forgot you either, she admitted, not for a single day. The confession hung between them like a bridge, neither was quite ready to cross. Adelaide felt the pull of old attraction, but also the weight of new understanding. They were different people now, shaped by years of separate experiences. What happens now? She asked. Now we take things one day at a time, James said, standing to go. You're here to take care of your father and help your brother. I'm here to help however I can. Beyond that, he shrugged. We'll see. As he reached the door, he paused. Adelaide, I'm glad you came home. After he left, Adelaide stood alone in the kitchen, washing dishes and thinking about the man James had become. The boy she'd loved had been passionate and impulsive, full of grand dreams and romantic gestures. This man was steadier, more grounded, but she sensed the same fire burning beneath the surface. The question was whether she had the courage to reach for it this time. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Adelaide was sitting with her father when Dr. Patterson arrived, his face grave as he examined his patient. I'm afraid the pneumonia is spreading, he told them privately. It's a matter of days now, not weeks. Adelaide felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She'd hoped for more time to rebuild their relationship, time to decide what to do about James, time to figure out where she belonged. I want to see James, her father said when the doctor had gone. Send for him. By the time James arrived, Adelaide's father had rallied enough to sit up in bed. He gestured for James to come closer, his voice weak but determined. "I need to know you'll take care of her," he said without preamble. "Adelaide, she's going to need someone." "Father," Adelaide protested, but he held up a hand. "I'm dying, girl. Let me speak." He turned back to James. "I know I wronged you both. I let my pride and my fears cloud my judgment. But I'm asking you now, will you take care of my daughter?" James looked at Adelaide, his eyes asking permission. When she nodded slightly, he turned back to her father. "If she'll have me," he said simply. "I never stopped loving her." "And you?" Her father's eyes found Adelaide's. "Will you give this good man the chance I denied him 7 years ago?" Adelaide felt the weight of the moment, the importance of her answer. But looking at James, seeing the love and hope in his eyes, she knew there was only one response possible. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I will." Her father smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since arriving. "Then I can rest easy." But before any of them could say more, Samuel burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement and concern. "There's a problem," he announced. "The Morrison Ranch is being challenged. Some men from back east are claiming Father bought the land fraudulently 20 years ago. They're demanding we vacate immediately." Adelaide's father tried to sit up straighter, alarm in his eyes. "That's impossible. I have the deeds, the papers." "They say the original owner never had the right to sell," Samuel continued. "Something about it being treaty land that should have gone to the territory instead." James stepped forward. "Who are these men?" "They're staying at the hotel in town. Lawyers from Denver, they say, but there's something about them that doesn't sit right." Adelaide felt a chill of recognition. "What are their names?" "The leader calls himself Thompson. Big man, well-dressed, with a scar on his left hand." Adelaide's blood ran cold. "Marcus." "You know him?" James asked sharply. "Marcus Whitmore, my former fiancé." Adelaide sank into a chair. "He must have discovered Father's illness somehow. He's desperate for money. His gambling debts are enormous." "But how could he claim the ranch?" Samuel asked. "He couldn't, unless," Adelaide's mind raced, "unless he's found some legal loophole or manufactured evidence. He's clever and ruthless when he needs to be." Her father's breathing had become labored with agitation. "I won't let some eastern snake steal what I've built. Those papers are legal." "I know they are," Adelaide assured him. "But Marcus is skilled at manipulating legal systems. We need to fight this properly." James moved to the window, his jaw set with determination. "I know every rancher in this territory. If there's a legal challenge to the Morrison land, it affects all of us. We'll band together." "It's more than that," Adelaide said quietly. "This is personal. Marcus is angry that I broke our engagement, and he's striking back the only way he knows how." "Then we make sure he fails," James said simply. Over the next 2 days, Adelaide found herself caught between caring for her dying father and dealing with the legal crisis threatening her family's legacy. Marcus had indeed arrived in Copper Ridge with 2 associates, all claiming to represent Eastern Development Corporation and insisting that the Morrison Ranch was built on illegally acquired land. Adelaide met with him at the hotel, James insisting on accompanying her despite her protests. "Adelaide, my dear," Marcus said, rising from his chair with practiced charm. "You're looking well. Country air agrees with you." He was as handsome as ever, tall, well-dressed, with the kind of refined features that had once impressed her. But now she saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he assessed everyone and everything for potential advantage. "Marcus," she remained standing, "I think we can dispense with pleasantries. What do you really want?" "Justice," he said smoothly. "Your family has been occupying land that rightfully belongs to the territory. We're simply here to correct that historical wrong." "And profit handsomely from it, no doubt," James interjected. Marcus's eyes shifted to James, and Adelaide saw recognition dawn. "Ah, the local rancher. I've heard about you. How convenient that Adelaide's childhood infatuation should resurface just when she needs protection." "Be careful," James warned, his voice dangerously quiet. "Gentlemen," Adelaide intervened. "Marcus, I know why you're really here. Your debts, your desperate need for money." "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus said, but his smile had grown strained. "I know about the poker games, the loans from unsavory characters, The threats against your family's reputation. Adelaide stepped closer. I know you're not here as a legitimate businessman. You're here as a desperate man looking for any way to recoup your losses. Marcus's facade cracked slightly. Your father's illness provides an opportunity to correct an injustice. The fact that it benefits me is merely coincidental. Then you won't mind if we examine your supposed evidence with the territorial judge, James said. Of course not, Marcus replied, but Adelaide caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. That evening, as Adelaide sat with her father, she felt the weight of fighting a battle on multiple fronts. Her father's condition was deteriorating rapidly, but he insisted on reviewing the original land deeds with her. The papers are in order, he said weakly. But sometimes that doesn't matter if the other side has money and influence. Then we'll have to be smarter, Adelaide said, taking his hand. Tell me everything you remember about the original purchase. As her father recounted the story, Adelaide began to see potential weaknesses in Marcus's claim. The land had been purchased from a private owner who'd received it through a legitimate grant from the territorial government. The chain of ownership was clear and well documented. There's something else, her father said suddenly. Hidden in the barn, behind the loose board in the north wall. There's a metal box with additional papers, correspondence with the territorial office, receipts, witness statements. I kept them as insurance. Adelaide squeezed his hand. I'll find them. But when she and James searched the barn by lantern light, they found the hiding place had been disturbed. The box was gone. Marcus? Adelaide said grimly. He must have had someone search the property. Or he's working with someone local, James suggested, someone who knew about the box. The implication hung between them. If Marcus had a local accomplice, their situation was even more precarious than they'd thought. As they walked back to the house, Adelaide felt the full weight of her circumstances. Her father was dying, her family's ranch was under attack, and she was falling in love all over again with a man she'd once abandoned. I should leave, she said suddenly. If I go back to Boston, Marcus will follow. This is about me, not the ranch. James stopped walking. You think running away will solve this? I think it might protect the people I care about. The same way it did 7 years ago? The words stung because they were true. Adelaide had spent 7 years running from difficult choices, and now she was contemplating doing it again. This is different, she protested. This is about protecting my family. Your family needs you here, James said firmly. Your father is dying, your brother is overwhelmed, and the ranch needs defending. You don't get to run away again, Adelaide. Not this time. She looked at him in the moonlight, seeing the determination in his face, the strength that had been missing in the boy she'd once known. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared of making the wrong choice again. Then we'll face it together, he said, taking her hands. All of it. Your father's illness, the legal challenge, whatever comes next. But we face it together. Standing there in the darkness, Adelaide felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, not in Boston with its safety and conventions, but here, in this harsh and beautiful land, with this man who'd never stopped believing in her. Together, she agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss that felt like coming home. Epilogue. 6 months later, Adelaide stood in the doorway of the ranch house, watching James work with a young colt in the corral. The legal battle with Marcus had been resolved when the territorial judge examined the evidence and found his claims to be fabricated. Marcus had disappeared one night, leaving behind only debts and angry associates. Her father had passed peacefully 2 weeks after her return, surrounded by his children and the man he'd finally accepted as worthy of his daughter's love. The funeral had been attended by half the territory, testament to the respect he'd earned over the years. Now, Adelaide was preparing for a different kind of ceremony. Tomorrow, she would marry James Caldwell in a simple service at the church in town. She'd chosen to wear her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, rather than the elaborate gown she'd planned to wear for Marcus. Are you ready? Samuel asked, coming to stand beside her. More than ready, she said, smiling at her brother. Are you sure you can manage the ranch while James and I are on our wedding trip? I've been managing it for months, he reminded her. Besides, we'll only be gone a week. Adelaide nodded, but her attention was drawn back to James. He'd gentled the colt with patience and skill, the same qualities he'd shown in rebuilding their relationship. They'd taken their time, getting to know each other again, building trust and understanding. He's a good man, Samuel said, following her gaze. The best, Adelaide agreed. I almost lost him once through my own foolishness. I won't make that mistake again. That evening, as she walked the property one last time as a single woman, Adelaide reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She'd left this place as a frightened girl, choosing safety over love, convention over authenticity. She was returning as a woman who'd learned that true security came not from avoiding risks, but from facing them with the right person by her side. James found her by the old oak tree where they'd carved their initials as children. The letters were still there, weathered but visible. Having second thoughts? He asked, slipping his arms around her from behind. Never, she said, leaning back against his chest. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Even though you're giving up your comfortable life in Boston for a rough rancher in the Arizona Territory? Adelaide turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd waited 7 years for her to find her way home. Especially because of that. I tried to be someone I wasn't, James. I tried to fit into a world that was too small for who I really am. And who are you really? She smiled, thinking of the girl who'd once ridden wild horses and dreamed of adventure. I'm someone who belongs here, with you, building something lasting and true. As they kissed under the star-filled sky, Adelaide felt the last of her doubts fade away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, and the beautiful uncertainty of a life lived without reservations. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of the man who'd seen her true self and loved her for it, in the place that had shaped her spirit and called her home. The wind whispered through the oak leaves, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of tomorrow. And for the first time in 7 years, Adelaide Morrison was completely, utterly, and joyfully at peace.